Joining us now, a man who didn't vote for Donald Trump and probably won't in the future, but understands his case and represented him at least once. Professor Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law. He also wrote the book, Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. Professor, first off, welcome back. If I told you when you wrote the book that we're looking at 3-4 indictments in a year, would you have thought it would get this serious, this aggressive?
Well, I predicted all 4 of the indictments, and I also predicted, although not in my book, but I predicted that the Hunter Biden plea bargain would not be accepted. The reason my predictions are correct and CNN's are always wrong is they're always wishful thinking, and mine is just based on my experience. I don't have a horse in the race. I just try to predict based on 60 years of doing this. But the main point of principle that I really want to get over is that, and this applies to both parties, the leading candidate against the incumbent president should never be prosecuted by the attorney general of the president.
Of course. Unless
the case against him is overwhelming and beyond any dispute. The Nixon standard is what I call it, that it's so overwhelming that both parties support it. That didn't happen in this 3rd indictment. It's not going to happen in the 4th indictment. It didn't happen in the first New York indictment. It may have happened in the Florida indictment with that one piece of evidence of the president foolishly waving a piece of classified material in front of a writer and a publisher and saying, I could have declassified this when I was president, but I didn't. But the crime there isn't particularly serious. It's a paper technical crime. So I just don't think that they have it enough against this candidate who's now running 44-44 in the New York Times poll to use the criminal justice system to interfere with the election.
And it seems to be something he said a year ago. He says he's going to do everything constitutionally under the law to make sure he is never president again. He actually said that out loud, and it seems to be happening before our eyes while he pretends to be detached sitting on a beach all for 10 days. So Bill Barr, who's been the target of the president, also a great proponent of the president when the Mueller report came in, taking over for Jeff Sessions, said this about Republicans, and maybe you, Alan Dershowitz, have a problem with the indictment when it comes to indicting free speech. Listen to what he said on CNN, cut 2.
They're also saying that he was just exercising his First Amendment right here. Do you think that's a valid argument in your view?
No, I really don't think that's a valid argument because, as the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can even tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech. So, free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy.
And if I could fast forward, I think he's talking about the electors in Michigan and Georgia and places like that, maybe Arizona. Your thoughts on Bill Barr's assessment?
Well, I like Bill Barr. He's a good man, but I think he's just dead wrong about that. Of course, this is a free speech case. Everything involves his exercise of free speech, and not only First Amendment free speech, but also the First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievances. The way you protest an election is to come up with an alternate slate of electors. That was done in 1960. That was done at the Tilden Hayes election. That's been done throughout history, and a court in Hawaii said that's the right way to do it. It's interesting that the indictment is based on lies, and the indictment itself contains a blatant lie by Jack Smith. He describes the speech of January 6th, a speech that I think was terrible, never should have been made. But he describes the speech in the indictment and deliberately and willfully leaves out the key words of the speech, namely that the president told his people to protest peacefully and patriotically. By leaving out those words, it's a lie by omission. And under the standards set out in the indictment, Jack Smith could be indicted. He could also be indicted theoretically. It's not going to happen, obviously, under the Ku Klux Klan statute. The Ku Klux Klan statute says any people who conspire to deny somebody their constitutional rights is guilty of a crime. Well, what if the Supreme Court ultimately rules, as distinguished from what Barr said, that everything that Trump did and said is protected by the First Amendment? That would mean that Jack Smith tried to deny Trump his constitutional rights in this indictment. I make that point not to argue that Jack Smith should be indicted, of course not, to make the point that the indictment is so broad, so wide,
Right.
so all-encompassing. It can include so much political conduct. We have two presidents in our history. Of all of our presidents, only two have been called honest. Honest Abe and Washington and the cherry tree. Does that mean that every other president has been dishonest? Probably. Probably every single one of them is told a fib to get elected or to stay in office. And we don't punish. We don't criminalize
Gotcha.
Political lies. And the government's going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump himself knew and believed that he had lost the election. I don't think anybody who knows Trump thinks that that's true. Trump talked himself into believing that he had won the election. And if that's the case, then there's no corrupt motive or intent.
I agree. Listen, Alan, you know him. He respects you. You'll tell him over and over again, I didn't vote for you. He's like, I don't believe you. So you get along, you represent him. I have never had a moment when I've talked to him since the election, and I was the only one to do an interview with him after the election. And he has never, in a quiet moment, on air, off air, radio, TV, said that he didn't win. In fact, he gets mad at you. He goes, I know you don't believe it, but I won that election. I know you don't want to follow it. You won the election. I go, I just don't see any proof that you might have won. I don't know. And we goes back and forth. And to the point where I know somebody that toured with him last summer, and he said he wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop off camera, and the crowd didn't even react. So he would say it, and people weren't even supporting it. So for you to put that in the document that he lost the election, I think is farcical. What do you think the significance is they didn't put in conspiracy and didn't say he caused an insurrection. Do you think those charges could be coming, or do you think the fact that their absence is significant?
I think the absence is significant, and I think, obviously Jack Smith, who's a smart prosecutor, very clever, creative prosecutor, knows that the speech itself was protected by the First Amendment when he said he wanted people to go to the Capitol and protest peacefully and patriotically. That protects the speech under the First Amendment. So I don't think we're going to see any insurrection or any incitement, because he didn't incite. He just advocated, and there's a difference under the First Amendment. I do think that this is not the kind of case that should ever be brought against the man who is running against the incumbent president. That's what they do in banana republics. The incumbent president gets his attorney general to indict his political opponents. And that shouldn't be happening in America. If it meets the Richard Nixon standard, so obvious, so evident that crimes were committed, that both parties agree with it.
Right.
If Trump were caught really giving a bribe or taking a bribe or doing anything like that, a lot of Republicans would have agreed that he should be indicted. I spoke recently at a Republican club in Aspen, Colorado, and I spoke in a number of places. I hardly met any Republicans who actually supported Trump's presidency. There's a lot of opposition to Trump's presidency among moderate centrist Republicans, but they also are strongly opposed to the weaponization of the criminal justice system against him, because, today it's against Trump. Tomorrow it's against Biden. They're trying to impeach Biden for non-impeachable offenses. And the day after tomorrow it's against you, and then it's against me.
Know.
Look, already the 65 Project has come after me because I defended Donald Trump. They filed Barr charges against me baselessly, and they've gone after every lawyer. And now 5 of the lawyers are characterized as unindicted co-conspirators in this indictment. That sends a terrible message to lawyers. Don't get near Trump. Don't defend him. Don't give him advice. If you do, you may find yourself on the wrong end of an indictment.
Look, Professor Dershowitz, you saw that his lawyer was forced to testify against him. They claimed that he was involved in a illegal activity, I guess hiding the documents. So next thing you know, his lawyer's testifying against his client. We haven't seen that. I have never seen that in my life.
I taught ethics at Harvard Law School for many years, and I just don't see a basis for claiming that violates the privilege. Every time you have a meeting with a client, they always suggest things that might be criminal, and you tell them no. That's the essence of the lawyer-client communications. I mean, I've had so many cases where clients says to me, wouldn't it be better if I go to Brazil? No, it wouldn't be. They'll catch you. They'll bring you back. Wouldn't it be better if I paid this witness? No, they're going to get you on obstruction of justice. But those conversations occurred, and they're privileged. And the judge was wrong in suggesting that that privilege didn't apply. Look, we have two laws in America, the laws for most of the rest of us and the laws for Donald Trump. That's why I wrote my book, Get Trump. It's all about this selective approach and prosecution of one man, Donald Trump.
Gotcha.
Understandably, Donald Trump has, caused some real damage to democracy in America. That's why I vote against him, and that's why I'm going to continue to vote against him. But I'm going to continue to defend the Constitution. I'm not going to let the sacred Constitution that I've been defending for 60 years to be put in the gutter because Democrats think it gives them an advantage. In the same way, I'm not going to allow, without comment, the Republicans to impeach Biden.
I agree.
Biden may have done some wrong things, but he hasn't committed any impeachable offenses, at least up to now.
Professor, I want you to hear Bill Barr again take this case on. Cut one.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate case. I think, unlike the document case, it's going to have issues of proof. It's a more complicated case. And I think there are some downsides to it. I think there were reasons not to bring it. I've said before, I'm a little concerned about the slippery slope of criminalizing legitimate political activity. I'm worried about moving in that direction.
Do you think it's something you would have brought?
I think, I don't know if I would have approved the indictment, but as a legal matter, I don't see a problem with the indictment.
So he kind of hedged on both things, but he does see problems with it. But of course, there was no follow-up. What do you mean the problems? But go ahead.
Well, I think he makes a point distinguishing between whether it's a legally sound indictment, and reasonably you could argue about that, but whether it should have been brought. No, it should not have been brought. And the evidence problem is going to be severe. They brought Jared Kushner into the grand jury, and CNN immediately announced, Jared Kushner is flipped against his father-in-law. He's going to be the smoking gun. Well, he testified, no.
I know.
My father-in-law said, I believe it. We told him it wasn't true. But he insisted on saying, I believe it. So I don't know where they're going to get the evidence, the smoking gun evidence. They have smoking gun evidence in the document case, that video of waving the classified material. But it's not that serious a case. But in this case, which is very serious, I just don't see where they're going to get the evidence. Maybe they'll flip somebody. Maybe they'll get somebody to say, oh, yeah. After he thought nobody was listening, he admitted to me that he knew the election was fair. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think that he ever thought the election was fair. I think he was wrong. But under the First Amendment, you have the right to be wrong. New York Times versus Sullivan establishes the principle that newspapers and certainly politicians, and certainly in criminal cases, can't be prosecuted or sued for being wrong. You have to prove that they did it with malice, and I don't think they're going to be able to prove that against Donald Trump. Professor,
no better guest to start the hour with. Thanks so much. Go out and get his book, Get Trump, and understand the mission behind it. And it doesn't matter who you voted for. There's right and wrong. And this is a distraction for what the country really needs. We have real issues. We saw what happened with our debt. We see what's going with the China challenge. And all we do is keep suing each other and trying each other. Thanks so much, Professor. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.